Are you hungry for the usual today? Or are you ready to spice things up with the new Nashville Hot Brisket from Firehouse Subs? We're kicking up our slow-smoked beef brisket with Nashville Hot Seasoning. It's topped with melted pepper jack and our sweet and tangy slaw, served piping hot on a toasted cornbread roll. Yeah, a cornbread roll. Save time. Order your new Nashville Hot Brisket on the Firehouse Subs app today. Firehouse Subs. Enjoy more subs. Save more lives. Participating locations, limited time only.
Prepare for glory!
I don't know if you got your popcorn ready. Do you got your popcorn ready? I came out the womb, I was ready.
And he's hit the end zone for an unbelievable touchdown.
I would be honored if you played football for this team.
Throw it up above his head. They can't jump with me. Golly.
Oh, they tackle him at the 40-yard line.
Who can make a play? I can. Who can make a play? I can.
What's going on, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another episode of the Fantasy Football Roundtable Podcast, proud members of the Full-Time Fantasy Podcast Network. You can find them at FTFPodNet on Twitter. You can find me at SportsFanaticMB on Twitter. And you can find my co-host for the day, Mr. Matthew Fox, at Nighthawk7734 on Twitter. We are one of many great podcasts and likes of Jim Day of FF Champs, Adam Ronis and Dr. Roto from Sirius XM Radio, Bob Lung of the award-winning Fantasy Football Consistency Guide, Dwayne McFarland, Blake Sullivan, and a ton of other great podcasts, and you can find all of them on fulltimefantasy.com. For today's episode, as I mentioned, Mr. Matthew Fox will be joining me. We will do a little Joker talk here right off the top, as he went and saw it Saturday. You know that I went and saw it Friday night. Me and Dennis talked about it a little bit. Matt has a little bit of a different opinion than I do on the movie, so we're going to get his thoughts, and then we're going to jump right into breaking down 7 of the games from Sunday.
Hello!
What's going on, Matt? Thank you so much for joining me today. How was your weekend, and how did your fantasy weekend turn out for you?
I think my weekend was pretty good. My fantasy weekend didn't turn out too bad either. A lot of big games.
Yeah, so I went half and half here. I ended up unfortunately playing quite a couple teams with Deshaun Watson, Will Fuller stacks, which did not work out well for me at all. But I actually have Will Fuller and Aaron Jones in a couple leagues as well, which really helped me out. CMC in one, so not a bad weekend overall. Unfortunately, one of my big main leagues that I'm in, I cannot catch a break. I literally have played the highest scoring team every single week, and it has absolutely killed me outside of the 1 week I was the highest scoring team. So it has not been fun for me. I talked about it in the intro, though. Me and you discussed a little bit Saturday after you saw the movie. Everybody heard my take and Dennis's take on the Joker movie. We talked about it Thursday, the last time we were on together and recording. Have not got a chance to get your opinion out there yet, so go ahead and give our listening audience, the movie buff that you are, your opinion on the Joker movie, which you saw Saturday.
Well, I think it's going to be a movie that sticks out to people because of pretty incredible lead performance. But I thought it was a decent movie, but not quite as great as I was hoping. Anyway, I had thought prior to going to the movie that it might be in the race for Best Picture. I guess it still could be. Seems to be a lot more controversial than what it looked like it was going to be early on. I didn't like it quite as much in general as a movie as I thought, but I might. But I thought Joaquin Phoenix was really good.
Yeah, I would say that's probably the one thing that we agreed on, is that he was phenomenal. I did agree with, we talked a little bit about you saying that it's probably going to cost him a chance at getting a lot of awards due to how controversial the movie is. I could honestly see that as well. I thought he was phenomenal. I thought he made the entire movie. I mean, I don't think it's possible without his performance being as good as I thought it was, or how much I liked it. I know we went back and forth a little bit on some of our thoughts on the movie, but all in all, I feel like it's definitely something, I believe you said it was something worth watching. Like, I do think it's something at least watching once. I don't know, I'll probably go back and see it again, maybe a couple times, we'll see. I usually don't go back and watch movies multiple times unless it really does depend on the movie. But it's definitely worth watching. I'm glad that you liked it for the most part, though, because it was, as you said, very controversial. I've been kind of torn on, what some people think about it. I've had other friends who really loved it, some people who hated it. So it's really been something actually you touched on Thursday before. On the Thursday episode we did, was that you saw a lot of people that there was almost like no middle ground. It was either you liked it or you hated it. So it's interesting to see that. I'm interested to see how it kind of plays out over the next couple of weeks as well on how much people continue to go see it and everything, and then where other people start to land on it, if maybe that changes people's opinions at all.
Yeah, I think it'll be interesting to see where it ends up. But it definitely, for one of those movies that has a lot of fans, it also has a lot of people that are detractors. I think I told you I saw one clip from one of the top critics when I was looking at Rotten Tomatoes when I was doing my Fantasy Movie League article that said the greatest disappointment in film in 2019 is here.
Yeah.
Kind of struck me a little bit how split people are.
Yeah, which, I mean, again, I could see, I know you talked about, when we talked a little bit about some of the possible, like, political stuff with the movie and everything, and then there was other people who didn't, I, for instance, didn't even really think about any of that, didn't look at any of that for the movie. Other people are seeing that. There's other people that had issues with, obviously making him into a sympathetic character and all this other stuff. So it's definitely controversial, but I think we both agree it's at least something worth watching once. Even if you don't want to go see it in theaters, wait for it to come out video on demand or in Redbox or something, rent it for a night. Because in my opinion, his performance alone is worth giving it at least one watch, and then you can kind of make up your own mind what you thought about the movie.
Yeah.
All right, with that being said, let's jump in and talk about 7 of the games from Sunday.
We eating all day, bro. I'm hitting you every time. Every time you come as well, I'm gonna hit you. I'm not gonna be able to do that. You don't want no problems, bro. You a little boy. I'm a man. It's about to get ugly. I want to score. Yeah. You only talk so much. It's time to do now. Not just a good old-fashioned rear end whipping. To the house, baby. I'm in a league of my own. They ain't ready for me. Are you tired? Are you tired? Let's go.
Alright, we're going to kick it off with the first game on our list, which was the Minnesota Vikings and the New York Giants. Not really a close game. Vikings kind of I was going to say ran away with it, although they did run away with it. They also threw the ball quite a lot in this one, which a lot of us expected after all of the complaining by Stefon Diggs and Adam Thielen. Kirk Cousins, 22 of 27 for 306 yards, 2 touchdowns, both to Adam Thielen, finishing his QB9 on the week with 30.4 points. Of course, after I drop him, he finally decides to go off. Dalvin Cook, 21 carries, 132 yards, adds 86 yards on 6 catches to finish his RB4 on the week with 25.8 points. Adam Thielen, wide receiver 5 on the week with 33.5 points, 130 yards on 7 catches and 2 touchdowns. Stefon Diggs, a lot of controversy around him, which we'll get to in a minute. Wide receiver 49, 7.4 points, 86 yards on 6 catches. 44 yards on 3 catches, only got 4 targets in the game. So the Vikings did end up passing the ball a little bit more than they had the past couple weeks. Still ran the ball a lot with Cook, and he continues to dominate, so I don't see why you would move away from that to begin with. Before we get on to the Stefon Diggs discussion, do you think this is the start of them passing more, or just a way to kind of calm Adam Thielen and Stefon Diggs down, get them to stop complaining, and then they're going to move back to a more run-heavy offense?
Well, I think, first of all, I'm not sure Diggs really had a good enough game that it would have calmed him down that much. 4 targets, 3 catches, 44 yards. I actually thought he was going to do better. I saw a few sit-start questions about Thielen and Diggs, and my comment was, if not now, when? The Giants are not really noted for having much of a secondary at all. And especially with all the complaints coming into this game, you figure that they were going to make some kind of a concerted effort to pass better. I don't think this really necessarily tells us much one way or the other. It was an okay game, but not an incredible game. They were still trying to run the ball a lot, still 34 rush attempts in this game versus only 27 passes. They just found a little bit greater success. The real problem they've had early in the season isn't always that they aren't trying to throw the ball, though week 1, only 10 pass attempts. They weren't trying to throw a lot. It's when they have tried to throw the ball a lot, how successful have they been? And that's still a question. Was Kirk Cousins more confident trying to squeeze balls into windows because he was playing the Giants? Would he try the same thing against Green Bay? Would it be successful against Green Bay or Chicago? Those are still open questions. I mean, he only had a QBR of 69.9. So it was a fine day, but not an $83 million man day.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, on Stefon Diggs, you kind of brought that up. I'm with you. I don't think that he necessarily had a great day. However, it is also kind of hard to have a great day when you're only targeted 4 times on the entire day. A lot of people are worried that has something to do with the fact that he either has or hasn't asked for a trade, but there are definitely rumors out there. As we talked about a little bit the other day, he even bringing up the fact that he said there's truth to every rumor. I mean, we don't really know what that means. He did say after the game that winning cures everything, but then winked at some reporters who they all think that he's not necessarily happy with his performance and everything. I mean, I know we talked about this last week, but I don't know what we can do with Diggs at this point, except for possibly move him to your bench. He's already kind of fallen down into that flex territory. He's not a wide receiver 2 where most people drafted him. But, I mean, is there any way that I can't imagine you're cutting him in a redraft league because he still has the talent.
Yeah, I'm not cutting him. And, you're going to have weeks. Last week, about the time that we had written him off for dead, he got 7 for 108. I just don't think there's a great consistency there. There's not a great consistency apparently anywhere in the Minnesota pass offense. I mean, Thielen, 7 for 130 and 2 TDs. It looks incredibly great. He only had 8 targets, so he was incredibly efficient too. Yeah. And I saw a couple of the catches he made that were contested that could have, if you're playing a slightly better secondary, maybe that ball gets knocked away. Maybe that ball doesn't even get thrown. So, like I said, my response pregame had been for both those guys, if not now, when, based on the matchup and the situation. And what I saw was not exactly encouraging. And I think if you're a Diggs owner, it's hard to know what to do. I definitely am not cutting him, but I'm also not starting him with any confidence. As we come to bye weeks and stuff, I guess he'll work his way back into lineups, and you just have to hope for one of those 7 for 108 or that he catches 1 for 40 and a touchdown. But that seems to really be it right now. He's a boomer bust flex option.
Yeah, that's. I mean, like I said, you can't. I was kind of cutting him facetiously. You're not going to cut him. He's just too talented. That being said, I would not be surprised, or I shouldn't say surprised. Surprised the wrong way. I would seriously consider moving him to my bench. So, for instance, just using one of my leagues, I have a redraft league where I decided to start him in the flex spot yesterday and decided to sit DJ Chark. That was more because I thought Bradbury would be on him, and Bradbury, in my opinion, is still one of the best cornerbacks in the league. So that's why I sat him, and obviously that ends up being a bad decision on my part because, I mean, DJ Chark goes off and has a phenomenal game, and we saw exactly what we got out of Stefon Diggs, and it was god-awful and horrible. So, for me, I feel like going forward, I'm not doing that anymore. I'm going to go ahead and start DJ Chark every week, and it's going to be Stefon Diggs fighting to get into my lineup. And I feel like that's kind of where everybody has to go to now at this point with them, just because we don't know, as you point out, what's going to happen with this offense. It has just not been consistent enough to really entertain, I would say, playing these guys every week. It's not last year. It sucks to think of, too, because both these guys caught 100 passes last year. So it's insane to think that two guys who were catching 100 balls last year and putting up the points, they were both top 12 wide receivers. And in a year that not a lot of people thought was going to be like that, because this was Kirk Cousins' first year in the offense, and everybody thought the offense would grow even more. I do think some of that has been hindered for them because of how good Dalvin Cook has been. If Dalvin Cook was out there rushing the ball 20 times and only getting like 80 yards, they probably would not be running him as much as they are. But the fact that he's getting over 100 yards every single game, and that he is taking work away from them in the receiving game as well, as much as he's getting passes. Like, I don't remember, no, I talked about it with Dennis on Friday. Coming into the game this week, I'd imagine I know Thielen passed him, or maybe he didn't actually, but through the first 4 weeks of the season, Dalvin Cook had been targeted more than Adam Thielen and Stefon Diggs combined up until that point. And he got 6 more catches yesterday. Adam Thielen got 7, so he only caught him by 1. So they're really leaning on Dalvin Cook in this offense, and I don't see that changing anytime soon. I still think Adam Thielen needs to be played because he definitely seems to be the go-to guy for Kirk Cousins when it comes to the passing game. We saw it in week 1 when they were really run heavy. He still threw the ball to Adam Thielen. So I still think he's the go-to guy, and Diggs, unfortunately, now is like the third fiddle in this offense. It's Cook, Thielen, and then Diggs. On the Giants side, Daniel Jones, 21 of 38, 182 yards, 1 touchdown, 1 interception, finishing his QB19 with 17.7 points. We saw Wayne Gallman get knocked out really early in this game, just 14 carries on 2 yards. So Jonathan Hillman comes in, the rookie. He gets you 20 yards on 9 carries, finishing as RB 52 on the week with 3.4 points. Darius Slayton gets a touchdown on this one. Wide receiver 16.2 points, 62 yards, 4 catches, and a reception. Sterling Shepard would have ended up having a much better day than what shows on the record here. A couple bad throws by Daniel Jones and a drop by Shepard. 49 yards on 5 catches, finishing as wide receiver 37 with 9.7 points. Evan Ingram, tight end 10 with 10.7 points in this one, finishing with 42 yards on 6 catches. And then Golden Tate, 13 yards on 3 catches. So Sterling Shepard is now in the concussion protocol. Looks like he's probably going to miss this coming week. They play Thursday night against the Patriots. There's a very small chance he passes all of the test and concussion protocol stuff before Thursday. So right now I'm saying it's pretty safe to say Sterling Shepard will not be playing Thursday night. However, as I stated, he could have had a much better game. Daniel Jones overthrows him in the end zone. He has to make kind of like a circus catch, gets 1 foot down, doesn't get the other one down. Had he, it'd have been a phenomenal catch. And then a second time in the end zone, Daniel Jones hit him. He had a defender behind him, kind of hitting at him, everything, but he should have came down with the ball, in my opinion. So Shepard had a chance for 2 touchdowns. The good news for the Giants is, though, we could see Saquon Barkley back on Thursday. There was a lot of talks that he might have played Sunday. They didn't play him. He looks to be okay. They've been posting videos of him cutting and doing this and that on the field. Pat Shurmur came out earlier today and said there's a possibility he plays. It looks like they're leaning toward trying to get him out there Thursday night. How much do you think this could bolster this Giants offense if Barkley's able to play on Thursday? And what was your takeaway from this offense on Sunday?
Well, the Giants, I know there was a lot of love affair with Daniel Jones. He had a couple of good games to start, but I thought the Giants were going to struggle in this one. Vikings, much better defense than anything that they've faced. I think we've seen Tampa Bay doesn't really have a defense, and the Redskins are a hot mess. So this was always going to be a little bit more of a challenge. He was okay. Better days will probably come, although not Thursday night when they're playing the Patriots. I'll be curious. It will be nice to see Daniel Jones with Saquon Barkley because we haven't really seen that together. I'd be curious to see what that offense looks like. You know, at some point in time, it'd be nice to see the Giants offense with all of its pieces there at the same time. It doesn't sound like we're going to get that this week with Shepard probably in the concussion protocol and not coming back. And I think there's even bigger chance we're going to see Saquon Barkley because Gallman also got a concussion, probably won't come back. But, you know, it's going to be a tough test against New England. I still think it's good growing for Daniel Jones. He's looked okay. They still have offensive line issues, too. He got hit quite a bit. They couldn't get any traction going on the running game. 20 carries for 64 yards isn't really going to get it done. Yeah. So there's still work to be done in New York.
Yeah, and I think obviously Barkley coming back could help him. We've seen, as you said, he's looked fairly good so far. It was a tough test for him. Vikings defense extremely good. He doesn't have, you know, the offensive line around him. I'm sure that the Giants would like. Shepard did play most of that game before coming out at the end there. Having Ingram, obviously, it would be great to see him with all of his weapons, which hopefully we'll get to see next week if Barkley does come back. Hopefully he doesn't get injured. I, too, am excited to see what Barkley can do. Because we've already seen there's been a little bit more production and upside with this offense since Daniel Jones has come in there, which I think it actually helps Barkley more with him being there than Eli Manning. The next game on the list here is between the Jacksonville Jaguars and the Carolina Panthers. What ended up being a very thrilling game, one that I was paying very close attention to. Jaguars 27, Panthers 34. Gardner Minshew goes 26-44, 374 yards and 2 touchdowns, but does get 3 fumbles in this one, finishing his QB7 with 31.66 points. Leonard Fournette, 108 yards on 23 carries and 1 touchdown, does add 29 yards on 4 catches to finish his RB5 on the week with 25.2 points. DJ Chark, the Chark attack, balls out again. 164 yards on 8 catches and 2 touchdowns to finish his wide receiver 4 on the week with 36.4 points. D.D. Westbrook, wide receiver 19 with 15.2 points, 82 yards on 7 catches. And then James O'Shaughnessy, I was getting ready to talk about this guy as a possible tight end replacement if you needed a filler for bye weeks coming up here. 57 yards on 3 catches to finish his tight end 12 on the week with 8.7 points. However, he got hurt in this game, and it turns out he tore his ACL. He will be out for the remainder of the season. That sucks. Was really hoping that the Irish legend could be a decent pickup for many. I was getting ready to tout him. I had that on the show sheet before I saw the news, then had to go back in and change it. Minshew struggled in this one, as I said, 3 crucial fumbles that really allowed the Panthers to get in this game and ended up winning it, yet had 3 chances at the end of the game with multiple untimed down penalties for them to win it, just couldn't make it happen. That Panthers defense was rushing him all day long, giving him fits. The big question for me, and I didn't even put it on here, we'll talk about Leonard Fournette as well. DJ Chark. I know we've talked about it before. I want to really get into it here. A lot of people thought D.D. Westbrook was going to be the guy and the main guy in this offense. I don't know if it's because Gardner Minshew worked with DJ Chark on that second string and everything before he became the guy with Nick Foles going out or what. Those two seem to have an amazing chemistry. Is DJ Chark the number 1 in Jacksonville now? And he's someone that must be started every single week for you.
I think he's the number 1 in Jacksonville. I think what we've seen the last 2 weeks, too, is they have a whole lot of receivers, and it was hard to tell exactly what the rotation and the targeting structure was going to be. It seems like Chark is the top, and Westbrook is a pretty safe one that's getting quite a few targets. If you look at yesterday, both of those guys got 11 targets. Nobody else got more than... Well, I guess Fournette got 7, but if you were taking him out, nobody else got more than 4, and that was O'Shaughnessy at the tight end. So I think at least we're getting a more clear picture there, getting a little separation. I think Chark has just been more efficient and more explosive, too. He seems to be coming up with some of these big plays. I mean, he and Westbrook each had 11 targets. He caught 8 of them for 164 yards. That's some pretty incredible production. Yeah. You are starting him. I don't know if I feel completely confident he's a wide receiver too from week to week. I guess we'll have to see how this Jacksonville offense is going to go. Like last week, he didn't exactly put up incredible receiving numbers.
Right.
They leaned real heavily into Leonard Fournette. Fournette had a good game here. It was kind of a more high-scoring back-and-forth game, so I think that gave a little more room. But certainly he seems like the one that has been the most consistent. It feels a little bit like a poor man's version of the Rams in some ways, where we've seen a few different receivers come in there, but we really feel like Cooper Kupp is the one that you can most bank on.
Right.
He seems to be getting the most steady floor. I feel like Chark is kind of emerging from the pack here in Jacksonville in somewhat the same way.
Yeah, so what I would say on last week was I went back and looked at it, and Harris was on Chark about 70 to 80%. I think it was like 76% of the time. So I feel like that might have had to do something with why he wasn't that productive. As we've talked about, you being a Broncos fan, Chris Harris is phenomenal cornerback, one of the best in the league. I don't expect a second-year player to be able to get the best of Chris Harris. He still had, I think it was like 6 points but not what we've seen out of him, obviously. I do think he's also kind of turning into the red zone threat with his size and hand and the way that he's able to torque his body in any way that he needs to catch the ball. We saw an amazing catch on the sideline yesterday that a lot of people thought went out of bounds. Now, and the one thing I'll say for him moving forward as well is he has a ton of phenomenal matchups. So this week, they have the Saints. Likely, if they go anything like what the Broncos did and putting Chris Harris on him, that means Marshawn Lattimore is going to be on him. I think Marshawn Lattimore probably gets the best out of that matchup most of the time. I don't imagine Tarik beats him, but again, a touchdown gets your day for him, especially if you're playing him in the flex. But then after that, you got the Bengals, Jets, Texans, Colts, Titans. Titans would be the next one that I'd be a little bit worried about because the Jets, Texans, and Colts, especially Colts with the injuries they have in that secondary right now, all have struggling secondaries. So I think for me, Chark is a guy I'm firing up right now and feeling good about it. If you don't want to throw him in your wide receiver 2 spot, I think he's easily a flex starter every single week right now. Leonard Fournette. I mean, he's looked really good this season. Is it time to start believing again in Leonard Fournette and what we've seen, or do you still think this might be a little bit of fool's gold with him?
I think he has looked really good. They're committing to the run. Last week, I thought he took advantage of some pretty poor defense. Denver had some injuries in the second half, which opened it up. He had a couple of big plays. Interestingly, they came out today, and so the NFL confirmed that Von Miller got held at the point of attack on Fournette's huge 81-yard run last week.
Oh, wow.
So I thought kind of interesting. I gotta love the NFL. I don't know why they bother coming out and telling us that they missed penalties weeks after. It's not like it changes the game. But, he's always had talent. Questions have been sometimes attitude, sometimes offense, sometimes health. But I like the way they're using him. He had supposedly recommitted in the offseason and come back. I think you were probably starting him based on where you drafted him anyway.
Yeah.
I like what I've seen. They're going to play some tough defenses. I thought Carolina has been a pretty tough defense. They bottle up some big running backs. So the performance yesterday was probably stood out to me more than some of the other weeks we've seen Fournette run.
Yeah, unfortunately, I think the buy low window on him is now over with as well, with another huge game for him. But I think he's back now too. So if he's a guy that you've been hoping and praying on for Dynasty the past couple years, I think this is finally his shot, which is interesting too, because this is really his contract year. If he does good this year, chances that Jaguars, I would imagine they probably don't franchise tag him, but they can decide to pay him or he can go somewhere else. So this is a big year for him. I think for me, really, the only thing I see holding him back is if he gets injured. We do know he has an injury history. I hope that he doesn't, because I'd love to see what a full, healthy season of Fournette turns into. Speaking of Leonard Fournette, the guy that got drafted right behind him in almost every single rookie draft that year was Christian McCaffrey, and my God, this dude has been on fire this year. I think he is easily, after the performance we saw Sunday night between the Colts and Chiefs, is the NFL MVP at the moment. RB2 on the week with 47.7 points, 176 yards on 19 carries and 2 touchdowns, added 61 yards on 6 catches and a touchdown, has been absolutely phenomenal so far this season. I really hope he doesn't get any kind of injury or anything, because this offense is being filtered completely through Christian McCaffrey, and he is carrying them to a season that I hoped and thought that they would have, and they're doing it without Cam Newton, which is insane to me. Kyle Allen came in at QB 18 with 17.8 points, 181 yards and a touchdown, 17 of 30. We saw McCaffrey cramped up at the end of that game, and we saw, I really don't know how to say his last name, Reggie Bonifon, come in and actually looked fairly good, had one pretty much 60-yard touchdown run, 80 yards, 5 carries and 1 touchdown. He's a guy, if you own Christian McCaffrey, not necessarily in a redraft league, because I can't imagine a lot of people are going out there to get him, but in a dynasty league, if he's available, I would pick him up just in case McCaffrey does get hurt or they start to sit him toward the end of the year. A lot of people thought it might end up being my goodness, I forgot what Elijah Holyfield or Jordan Scarlett, who they both got from the drafts this year, undrafted rookies. But it looks like Bonifant is really kind of taken over as that backup role there to McCaffrey, a guy I would definitely roster if you have McCaffrey in a dynasty league, just in case something happens to him, or if down the stretch, if they end up making it toward the playoffs and they want to rest him a little bit, a guy that looks like he can carry the load for McCaffrey. On the receiving side, DJ Moore stepped up and had a good game, 91 yards on 6 catches, coming in as wide receiver 20 with 15.1 points. And Curtis Samuel struggled in this one after starting off pretty hot. A couple of good runs and a couple passes. I really liked what I saw out of him, but did not do much after that. Wide receiver 50 on the week with 7.4 points, just 19 yards on 3 catches. And as I said, 25 yards on the 2 runs. They've looked good. I know we kind of were split on them when we did our season preview stuff. You did not think that they were going to be that good. I was really buying into the weapons, and it does seem like Kyle Allen is getting the most out of these weapons. And again, against a good Jaguars defense, I know they didn't have Jalen Ramsey, but with what you saw, I mean, do you trust kind of, or what are your thoughts? I don't even want to say trust. What are your thoughts on Moore and Samuel? Because I kind of feel like everybody's kind of getting really divisive on these two now. We all liked him coming into the season. We don't know when Cam Newton's coming back at this point. So how much trust or how much do you like Moore and Samuel in this offense with Kyle Allen?
To me, they're kind of low-end flex options. You know, I was thinking this really has been a credit to Ron Rivera. I think we underestimate him sometimes as a coach and what he can do. I got a greater appreciation. Last year's Carolina team was kind of the all or nothing team on Amazon Prime this year, and I thought that was a really kind of fascinating window into him and into their process. But Christian McCaffrey is really carrying this team. He sort of reminds me of 2016 David Johnson. He's not only their best running back and dominating on the ground, he's their best receiver too. And you get some of these other guys will have good games here and there. But, you know, McCaffrey leads them in targets most weeks. He did yesterday, 9 targets. Is usually up there around their best receiver. Moore was very efficient yesterday, catching 6 of 8 targets for 91 yards. Pretty good. Samuel feels like he's more of the deep ball guy. And then you have Greg Olsen. What a fascinating season he's had. It was like a couple weeks ago, I think. He had 2 touchdowns. Looked like, Olsen's back to being Olsen.
Yeah.
Last week, this week, 0 catches on 2 targets. I mean, this offense, beyond Christian McCaffrey being running back 1, probably running back 1, period. There's a lot of talk about whether he will be the top pick next year. I think he's making a pretty strong case. Only been 5 weeks, though. Beyond that, I don't know how you feel real confident doing any of the offensive pieces on Carolina and being confident about what you're going to get.
Yeah, I think at this point, until we see more of it, again, we got to also remember this is only like Kyle Allen's 3rd game, I think, in the NFL. He played 1 game last year. So, I mean, we also might need to give him a little bit more time to be able to open up the offense more, where we are relying on him to do a whole lot, not having started a ton of games. Not everybody can be old Gardner Minshew coming in there. So, I do think that they could turn around, but at this point, if you have Moore and Samuel, you've maybe, if you have the depth, you're benching them, or if you're putting them in, it's, as you said, low-end flex options and just hoping for that touchdown to really kind of break her out. Again, Moore didn't have a touchdown, but still ended up with a good day. I was trying to find a poll. Okay, so I actually posted a poll about a week ago. Me and a friend of mine were having a serious discussion about who you would take at running back if you were if you were appointed GM of an expansion team, not fantasy, just NFL, an expansion team in the NFL, and your, owner of the team came down and said, hey, I need you to draft one of these running backs. And so I put just the top 4, the ones that everybody talked about. I said on the field and off the field considerations, everything, take everything into account. Who would you take? Saquon Barkley, Zeke Elliott, Christian McCaffrey, or Alvin Kamara? Did you happen to see how that vote went or turned out?
I did not.
Okay, who would you take out of those 4 if you had to pick one?
McCaffrey.
Okay, so he actually finished 2nd, which I was surprised. I was 100% sure that Zeke was going to finish 2nd in that poll. And then that's my argument, because I think Zeke is a lot better than people are getting credit for, but he finished second with 32%. Barkley got 50, Kamara got 15, and Zeke got just 3%, which I thought was insane.
So I would say the big difference there, Ezekiel Elliott, well, it's not like he's a bad receiver. He does not really seem to be a consistent receiver or a consistent part of the Dallas passing attack. If you look at the other three, they're not only clear-cut number ones at running back, they're also pretty high up there, like 1-2 in the team's passing hierarchy. Yesterday, you saw Dak Prescott again go over 400 yards, and Elliott, I think, caught 2 or 3 passes for 26 yards. I'm going to have to look it up. But I think that is where you're looking at a difference. In today's NFL, and people, especially on Twitter now, people have a really hard time separating what they think of for fantasy from what they are thinking of in terms of risk. Well, it's that 3-down, all-inclusive pass-catching back that is what everybody wants. And I think that's why you're seeing somebody, Ezekiel Elliott's great. He can win you a week depending on usage. But he doesn't seem to be that guy that's also going to catch. McCaffrey yesterday got 6 passes for 61 yards and a touchdown. That's 12 points through passing alone. Zeke can do it. It seems like a bigger long shot that's going to happen.
Yeah, so I'll just give my argument on Zeke here real quick. I don't want to go off on a whole tangent here. My point was that I do think Zeke is better in the receiving game than he gets credit for going into this year. I mean, the years prior, we had Scott Linehan calling the offense, which we know he was very much an old school kind of guy. He really only used the running backs as more of a running type of player. They did not do that much in the receiving game. A lot of people seem to forget he got 77 catches last year. I mean, that's a lot for a running back. I mean, it's not CMC, it's not Barkley, but it's still a lot of catches. He had 500 yards on top of that, 567 yards in the receiving game. And my argument was, while Christian McCaffrey is clearly the better receiver, I'm not going to argue that. I don't think Zeke is that much of a step down. Is he a step down? Yes, but he's not a big step down. I think it's CMC, Barkley, then Zeke if you were to talk about receiving ability. My biggest difference is, and although Christian McCaffrey kind of, I guess in a way, proved that wrong yesterday with how much he ran the ball, Zeke, in my opinion, is by far the best runner of those three. He can run it outside, inside. He can run you over. He can get by you. He has that home run speed. He can juke it, where CMC, yes, he's a great phenomenal. He can juke it and he can run by you, but he's not running it up the middle. Most of the times he gets hit, he's coming down. Barkley as well. I think as much as I love Saquon Barkley, I'm the biggest fan of that kid. He does struggle running the ball a little bit. He gets you a lot more points in his receiving game than he does running the ball. Now, once he hits a hole, he's gone. He's got that home run speed as well, and he is extremely elusive, but he does struggle at times running the ball. I do think he's going to get better with that with experience. He is still very young. Zeke's been in the league a lot longer, so he kind of has that veteran experience. So that was my biggest argument. I wasn't trying to say Zeke is like a million years or light years ahead of Christian McCaffrey, but for me, if I had to have a back that could do it all, I do think Zeke could do it all. He's just not asked to do that in that offense, and I think it's the same thing now with Kellen Moore. My biggest argument against the Cowboys yesterday was that they were just trying to do too much, and they stopped filtering the ball through Zeke. And I know that Dak had a good game, but realistically, if you go back and look at the first 3 quarters, the Cowboys did absolutely nothing against the Packers. They got a lot of garbage time production and made that game look a lot better than it was. But we'll save that talk for tomorrow because, as I mentioned to you offline, I got to get into some Amari Cooper talk because he's just really starting to get on my last nerve at the moment as a fantasy analyst. So the next game we have here is the Arizona Cardinals and the Cincinnati Bengals. The Cardinals pulling this one out 26-23. Kyler Murray continues to be a top quarterback in the league, but finally does it rushing, which was exciting to see. 20 of 32, 253 yards in the air, 93 yards on 10 carries and a touchdown, finishing his QB8 with 30.42 points. DJ continues to do it in the air as well, running back 12, 18.6 points, 65 yards on 3 catches, adds 91 yards on 17 carries, to finish as, again, RB12. Chase Edmonds came in as his back, DJ's back stiffened up on him a little bit. So Edmonds came in and got a little bit of run, 68 yards, 8 carries, and a touchdown. Actually looked fairly good. Much as I talked about with Bonifant and McCaffrey, chances are if you own DJ in a Dynasty League, Edmonds is already backing him up for you. If not, do everything you can to get him, because back injuries do worry me a lot as well. And if this causes him to miss any times, I think Edmonds is a worthwhile throw-in. I think he can still get you RB2 numbers. Larry Fitzgerald is the last fantasy relevant player on the day, 58 yards on 6 catches. The Cardinals, as I said, big win. The usual suspects get all the points for you. The DJ back thing, though, does that worry you at all? Stiffened up. He was able to come back in, but this is the second time in the past 3 weeks we've seen DJ get knocked up a little bit, have to come out, does come back into the game. But I personally am starting to get a little bit worried about all these nagging injuries for DJ. Are you worried at all?
Yeah, I think you have to be, especially considering that the Cardinals don't have a very great line. He's obviously getting beat up and hit. So I think it's definitely a concern. There was talk today from Kingsbury that Johnson may actually not be able to go this next week. So I think you have to be prepared for that.
Yeah, so Edmonds, fire him up. If you're in a redraft league, like myself, who's going to be one of the top waiver claims this week, because again, my team is it's just ridiculous. I'm gonna go on a whole thing here. Actually, we'll do the Bengals first, and then we'll touch on that. So the Bengals. QB10, Dalton actually had a good week, which was not surprising as the Cardinals defense is very suspect. 27-38, 262 yards, and 2 touchdowns. Again, finishing as QB10 with 29.73 points. Joe Mixon, RB26 with 11.9 points in this one, 93 yards on 19 carries, 1 catch for 16 yards. Tyler Boyd comes in at wide receiver 8 with 28.3 points in this one, 123 yards on 10 catches and a touchdown. And Auden Tate, if you ended up picking him up, he saves your day with a touchdown. Wide receiver 29, 11.6 points, 26 yards on 3 catches and a touchdown. I mean, for starters, I do have to apologize. On the episode Friday with Dennis, we talked about how Tyler Eifert was the play this week. Cardinals have been just god awful against the tight end. Thought Eifert would at least get a touchdown and do something here. That did not happen. I do apologize if you guys ended up picking Eifert and throwing him in there. I mean, they had been god awful, so everything said to start Eifert, yet he did not come through for you. After that, though, I think Dalton, he's a sit. I don't think you can play him anymore. I suggested some people play him on Sunday when I did some Dynasty Nerd stuff, talking about if you should start Dalton, but tough matchups ahead, Ravens, Jaguars, Rams, and then the Ravens again. So Dalton, this was just a great matchup for him and the Cardinals. I do think Boyd and Mixon, though, moving forward are the only 2 players I'd be willing to start every week. Do you agree with that, or would you start anybody else on this offense?
I think Boyd's the only one I'd feel consistent about. I mean, if Mixon was ever going to have a week where he went off, you'd think it would be against the Cardinals, who functionally have no defense. 19 for 93 and 1 catch for 16 yards is fine, but not that great. Another reason to fade Dalton is there seems to be persistent rumors that A.J. Green is not going to come back and play for them, but is going to get traded. So yeah, I think Auden Tate definitely have to pick him up. It looks like he could end up being wide receiver 2 for them for quite some time.
Yeah, the rumors are that he's going to get traded to, or at least the last one that I saw, I know you posted it as well on Twitter, is the team we're talking about in a minute. The tirade that I want to go off on here, and I'm really starting to worry about this, it might be something we can dive deeper into on Thursday. I really think it's time to start forgetting about the names on the back of the jerseys and just start looking at what's going on this year. For me personally, and I would like to see if you agree with this, it really seems like this has been a weird year for fantasy. We talked on Thursday last week, me and you, about the stay or slide, about some of the players that have been up in the top of scoring, which we have not seen. We are used to seeing certain names up there, and we're not seeing them anymore. And I feel like that's part of my problem. I have a lot of players, the likes that we've seen blow up in the past few years. Stefon Diggs, Sony Michel's another guy that I'll talk about, because I have him as well. And these guys are just not doing it this year. And people like me are continuing to trust in them, be like, you know what, I'm going to keep playing them because it's going to happen eventually. Meanwhile, we're seeing other guys like John Ross for the first couple weeks, DJ Chark every single week. I'm trying to think of someone else off the top of my head who's just been going off that, like, well, Dalvin Cook was more because of injury that got drafted late. But Cooper Kupp, same thing in a way, injury, but was a guy who went in like the 6th round in some drafts and is just blowing up. Like, I think it's time to start looking at who's actually been producing and start playing them and stop playing the guys just because they have that name value, if that makes sense. What is your thoughts just kind of on the overall craziness of the season so far? Do you agree with me, or do you think it's just maybe I'm thinking too much about that because I have a bunch of guys that are not performing?
Yeah, no, I think that's certainly true. I mean, just look at the last game we looked at talking about Greg Olsen. There's a guy that for probably half a decade was a no-brainer top 3 pick at tight end. You just pick it, set it, and forget it. And then you saw a flash of it earlier in the season, so you're tempted to just throw him out there, but you just don't know what you're going to get. It's been a tough year. I think right now, as we've come into week 5, now we have enough of a sample size to see what these offenses are doing right now and who they're tending to favor. And that's about the time where you really have to start getting away from, the love affair you had with guys all during, the long winter and summer months, and start looking at reality. And the reality is some of the lineups you have are not going to be what you thought they were going to be. I mean, I started a 16-team league this year by taking my first 2 picks as Juju Smith-Schuster and Stefon Diggs. I'm screwed.
Oh, God.
That's the reality. I have to play those guys every week.
Yeah.
I also I had Andrew Luck and Cam Newton as my quarterbacks in that league.
That sucks.
Just like, you know what? I don't even feel like setting a lineup this week. I'm going to throw out Kyle Allen, Carlos Hyde, and just say a quick prayer and then never look at them until Tuesday morning.
Yeah, so then I'm just going to stay on this way because you mentioned Juju and Stefon Diggs. So my big money redraft league, I did the same thing. I started off my team. I'll just read you like my starting lineup really quick, and you would think going into this season I'd have a realistic shot of winning a lot of games. I would think so. Juju Smith-Schuster, Stefon Diggs are my top 2 wide receivers. Then I had Sony Michel and Zeke as my top 2 running backs. Mark Andrews at my tight end position, and then my main flex players were Robert Woods. I had Darius Geis, Christian Kirk, and Devin Singletary. I also have Curtis Samuel, DJ Chark, and I ended up picking up Darrell Williams and Jack Doyle to kind of round out my bench. And my quarterback was Kirk Cousins. So, and again, as I mentioned earlier, I dropped him because he hadn't been doing anything. I picked up Jameis Winston, and that screwed me as well because Jameis Winston got me 17 points. Cousins put up 30 on waivers. So, coming into the season, I felt fantastic about that team. I was like, all right, like I've got a playoff team at least. I wasn't sure if it was a championship team, but a playoff team, and I'm about to go to 1-4. So it's just been a horrible year, and I don't even want to get into my main dynasty league because that's just, if I were to read you my roster, you would be surprised the fact that I'm now about to go to the same about one. I actually think I'll be 2-3 in that league, unless Baker, Odell, and Chubb go off for like 80 points tonight, which I guess is possible, but I do not think that's going to happen. So let's get back on track here before I end up just quitting fantasy altogether. I'm getting closer and closer to retiring.
One last thing.
What's up?
We've talked for years. People have talked about, conventional wisdom is you don't want to draft until the 3rd or 4th week of the preseason so that you can get a sense of games. More and more, preseason is a complete farce for all these teams. They're not playing any. So it doesn't matter when you're drafting anymore. You have to be aggressive and play the waiver wire and be prepared to adjust. Because, I heard a lot of talk the last few weeks on NFL radio that the first 3 or 4 weeks of the regular season are now giving us a picture of these teams the way preseason used to do. So I think it's just a shifting adjustment we're going to have to make. Sean McVay hasn't played a meaningful player in preseason in 2 years, and I don't think he's about to start.
Yeah, I don't think so. Maybe that changes in a couple years. I know there was a lot of talk about them expanding the regular season games and possibly shortening to maybe 2 preseason games. Maybe if they do that, you see starters out there a little bit more. But something that it seems like a lot of teams are moving toward is those joint practices, and they seem to play a lot more of stuff there and don't necessarily use the preseason games. So yeah, I agree with you. I feel like what it's going to lean to, at least for me, is I'm going to go more into players that I feel like are more proven and kind of stick with them and not necessarily take guys that I think have upside or injuries like Sony Michel. I still think Stefon Diggs, like Juju, a guy that we both drafted, I really think that is just because of their injury to Big Ben, though, because even though he didn't play great those first 2 games, we still saw plenty of flashes from him. We've still seen flashes, but when you don't have Big Ben running that offense, you're not going to get the production out of him you expected because you expect him to throw the ball a ton with Big Ben. That's just not going to happen with backup quarterbacks in there. With Diggs, I still don't think that was a bad call because as we talked about earlier, I mean, the dude had 100 catches last year. Nobody expected, at least not nobody that I saw or listened to expected them to go into like a 80-20 run pass split. Like you would expect it to probably be closer to 50-50 and it's just not. Now maybe that changes as the season goes on because you don't want to completely just destroy Dalvin Cook, especially if you expect to make the playoffs. But right now it's definitely not working out for you or me in owning Juju and Stefon Diggs. You mentioned AJ Green and the trade rumor possibilities. One of the teams that is looking to acquire him went to 4-1 on the season, and that was the Buffalo Bills, winning 14-7 over the Tennessee Titans. Josh Allen continues to show us that when he is healthy and out there, he is a QB1, 23-32, 219 yards, 2 touchdowns, 1 interception, added 27 yards on the ground, QB11, 27.2 points. Frank Gore struggled in this one, finishing his RB33 with 8.9 points, 60 yards on 14 carries. John Brown actually had a good game, which was a little bit surprising to me. I did not think that he would do much against this Titans secondary. 75 yards on 5 catches. Isaiah McKenzie, 52 yards on 2 catches in this one. Cole Beasley struggled, as did Dawson Knox. Beasley, 21 yards on 3 catches, and Dawson Knox, 12 yards on 2 catches. The Bills defense seems to be legit. We saw them hold the Patriots in check last week, had a chance to win that game. I think if Allen's out there, they probably do win that game. Man, if you guys are a baseball fan, the Cardinals just tied up the Braves in the 8th. That is a big deal. Sorry, I am a big baseball fan as well. I was really hoping the Braves would pull this series out. Back to football. Brown comes through. I feel like Brown's moved into flex worthy every single week now. I don't think that there's any way you can sit him. He definitely has that big play potential. We saw it last week. Didn't get the touchdown, but still 75 yards on 5 catches. That's a good game for a flex player. I think as long as Allen's out there, if Allen's not there, I would not start Brown. As long as Allen is in your lineup, John Brown is a flex player for me. What are your thoughts on John Brown?
Yeah, I mean, John Brown's done well. He was incredibly efficient, though. 5 targets, catches all 5 for 75 yards. So it's not like he's getting peppered in there. I still think it's tough. The ceiling, to me, is always going to be lower for these Buffalo receivers. Josh Allen has proved to be a winner, and he's done some good things. But that was probably why when I retweeted the AJ Green trade rumor, it was also with the crying emoji because I have Green and I have him in a couple places. I was hoping to bring him back off of the IR list, but bringing him back to Buffalo did not fill me with the same sense of excitement as bringing him back to an offense that turned John Ross into a household name.
Yeah,
Buffalo, they're a good team. I'm now coming around to the fact that it feels like they seem destined to sneak into the playoffs. They are not a fun team to watch.
No.
None of their games are fun to watch. And that's, no knock. Sometimes you got to win ugly. I'm a Denver fan. Our Super Bowl 50 winning team was not fun to watch. But, the outcome was fun. They have an incredible defense. They've really found something. I would like to see Devin Singletary get back at some point.
I know.
Thought he was really developing into something, and now this is the 3rd straight game he's been on ice. That might give them a little bit more dynamic pop in the running game. But Tennessee, a really good defense too, and they were at home. We knew this was going to be kind of a low-scoring slugfest. It really worked out for the Bills. Josh Allen, I think, was like an 11th hour active, because I'm pretty sure on Friday ESPN Fantasy had posted that Josh Allen was declared out for the week
Yes.
because he was in this list of players that was out. So I had to adjust our Friday preview, and then Saturday night it's like Josh Allen cleared. He's starting. I'm like, way to go, yes. Way to go.
Yeah, so that's what I was going to say. It honestly, it upset me a little bit because we talked about it. I obviously did the podcast with Dennis, and we did it very late Friday night too because he went and saw the Joker, as did I. So we recorded at I think it was 10:30 Central Time. And Allen he was ruled out. So when we did the Buffalo Bills preview, we went into it talking about Matt Barkley being the starter. And I still picked the Bills to win the game, but that's why he said, he was like, I'm taking the Titans because I don't think Barkley's going to be able to get it done. And then sure enough, I actually think it was really early Sunday morning that it came out that Allen's going to play. And I was like, wait, what? He was already ruled out. How is he going to play now? So yeah, it was crazy for that, but a good thing for Buffalo because obviously Josh Allen out there, is dynamic. And I agree with you on Singletary. He looked phenomenal while he was out there. I think it's kind of a good thing they're not rushing him back. As we all know, hamstring issues can linger. So maybe they're waiting for that to kind of fully get healthy before they throw him out there. As someone who owns him on a lot of leagues, I'm hoping he's finally good to go by next week because I could use him. You were talking about quarterbacks who are not that accurate, and Josh Allen, well, he played across from Marcus Mariota, who has that same issue. 13 to 22, 183 yards, 0 touchdowns, 0 interceptions. Did have a touchdown run called back, got 13 yards on the ground to finish as QB 26 on the week with 11.8 points. Derrick Henry continues to impress, though. 78 yards on 20 carries and a touchdown in this one to finish as RB19 with 13.8 points. Adam Humphries continues to be what looks like the most consistent wide receiver for the Titans. 30 yards on 4 catches to finish as wide receiver 53 with 7 points. Delaney Walker gets just nothing. 10 yards on 1 catch. Jonnu Smith, 57 on 1. For me, outside of Derrick Henry, I don't think you can start anybody on this team. I mean, A.J. Brown did have a touchdown. It was called back. I think it was a holding penalty or something like that. But I don't think you can start any of these wide receivers, Mariota, tight ends, nothing. I think it's just, for me, Derrick Henry and then maybe their defense, depending on what kind of league you play in. I mean, what about you? Any thoughts on this Titans team?
No, that's exactly it. Derrick Henry is an RB2 with upside, and I like the Titans' defense from time to time, but that's it. They're too wildly inconsistent.
All right, so let's jump into the Khalil Mack and John Gruden revenge game here. The Bears and Raiders in London. Bears come up short 21-24. Chase Daniels, not necessarily a good game, even though the stats kind of tell you it was. 22 of 30, 231 yards, 2 touchdowns, 2 interceptions, a crucial interception on the last drive, giving the Raiders the win. QB 15 on the week with 22.94 points. Both Tarik Cohen and David Montgomery struggled in this one. Cohen, RB 29 with 10.9 points. 10 yards on 4 carries and added 39 yards on 6 catches. David Montgomery, 25 yards on 11 carries and 1 touchdown, just 1 catch for 11 yards to come in at RB30 with 10.6 points. Allen Robinson, though, balled out in this one, 97 yards, 2 catches on 97 yards on 2 touchdowns on 7 catches. My goodness, I cannot speak, guys. Wide receiver 7 with 28.7 points. And then Anthony Miller, who had actually a couple good grabs in this one. 52 yards on 4 catches, coming in at wide receiver 34 with 10.7 points. So Khalil Mack loses his revenge game. Turnovers were big in this one. I loved what I saw out of Allen Robinson. And it reminded me that I really feel bad for this guy because he went from Blake Bortles to Mitch Trubisky. I think he has all the upside in the world, could easily be a top tier 2 wide receiver, but I just don't think that's going to happen with Mitch Trubisky throwing in the ball. What did you think about Allen Robinson in his game Sunday?
Yeah, I really like Allen Robinson. He's having a good season. At this point in time, Bears are another tough offense. I feel like Allen Robinson's the only one I feel good about starting consistently. Even the running backs, it's been real tough. Yeah. I love David Montgomery. I think Tarik Cohen is talented. The usage and the patterns are just not reliable right now.
Yeah, I'm not going to give up on Montgomery just yet. I do think a lot of the game script here with them being down, they were down most of this game big early. Like the Bears really made a comeback out. It was like late third and fourth quarter. I think that's really kind of what hindered Montgomery. Up until this game, he was getting a ton of carries. So I'm not going to give up on him yet, but he's definitely not the RB2 a lot of people were drafting him as. He's a middle tier flex for me right now. I do think he has that RB2 upside, but we need to see more in the running game for him. On the Raiders side, John Gruden kind of gets the last laugh here. Traded away Khalil Mack last year, actually got Josh Jacobs with one of those picks who had a phenomenal game here, finishing his RB3 on the week with 29.3 points in this one. 123 yards on 26 carries and 2 touchdowns, added 20 yards on 3 catches. Derek Carr, 25 of 32, 229, 0 touchdowns, 0 interceptions. Coming in at QB 23 with 14.21 points. And then really the only receiving options that stepped up here were the tight ends, Foster Moreau and Darren Waller, who finished they finished together. Moreau at tight end 13 with 8.6 points. Getting you 46 yards on 4 catches, and then Waller 39 yards on 4 catches, coming in at tight end 14 with 7.9 points. No Tyrell Williams. He was ruled out fairly early in the game. A lot of talk Friday that he wasn't going to be able to play, and that ended up happening. He was out. I don't really know what to think about this Raiders team, though. I was really surprised with Jacobs' performance. I did not expect him to run the ball as well as he did against the Bears, but they really seemed to be double-teaming Mack the entire game, which I think helped. Hicks went down with a injury in this one as well on that defensive line. I don't expect Jacobs to look as good as he did Sunday. He's not really looked good leading up till this game. I kind of put him in the Marlon Mack territory, a guy we'll talk about tomorrow. But for me, I think it's still just Waller and Williams. I mean, I guess Jacobs maybe is a low-end flex. What are your thoughts on those 3 guys? Has that changed for you at all with what you saw against the Bears?
Yeah, I think Jacobs, you have to say, is a reliable start for the time being. My questions about Jacobs were whether or not he was going to hold up and hit a wall later in the season because of his usage previously. But I think Oakland has a really underrated offensive line.
Yeah.
Derek Carr seems to be a kind of steady game manager. Waller is by far the best option because of his position and scarcity. But I think Jacobs and Williams are guys that you're throwing out there too. And I mean, you never know when Jacobs is going to get. He's had 2 touchdown games a couple of times now in these 5 weeks. He's getting plenty of opportunities.
Yeah, that he is. Next up, we had a game that is not at all as close as the final score indicates in the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and the New Orleans Saints. The Bucs losing 24-31. On the Buccaneers side, I talked about Friday. I thought Jameis Winston could have a decent game here. It wasn't horrible. I expected more, though. 15-27, 204 yards and 2 touchdowns to come in as QB 14 with 25.21 points. Peyton Barber comes in at RB 32. With 10.10 points in this one. My goodness, what did he get? 32 yards, a touchdown on 8 carries. Ronald Jones still, I thought, looked good, but is not getting the touchdowns. Peyton Barber is getting the red zone work. It looks like 35 yards on 9 carries for Jones. Coming in at RB 40 with 7.6 points. And Chris Godwin continues to be an absolute stud. 125 yards, 2 touchdowns on 7 receptions. Let's talk about the good before we get to the 2 bad players. Ronald Jones, I talked about him Friday. I thought that he'd be a good start. Obviously doesn't have a great day for you. I still think better days are ahead for Jones. He's continuing to get, he's out snapping up until this point, Peyton Barber, but Barber getting the red zone snaps does worry me a little bit. Chris Godwin, though, we talked about it a little bit. You said that you thought he could be a wide receiver 1 on Thursday's episode and stay there. You thought Evans would fall out. Man, do you look like a genius right now, because Evans got you 0.0 points. Are you panicking? Are you selling Evans? What are your thoughts on him right now? Because I own him in 1 league, and I'm just going to cut him in spite at this point.
I mean, I think he's too talented to cut outright. There's a danger when you try to say 1-for-1 comparison, but I think what we're seeing a little bit is it feels like in this Tampa Bay offense, like if we looked at the Arizona offense that Arians ran before, that Godwin has slipped into the Larry Fitzgerald in the slot role, which means Evans, who's a very talented player, is kind of in that outside John Brown. I forget who their third wide receiver that they had that was big for a while. Was
J.J. Nelson. J.J. Nelson was there for a little bit. I don't remember who the other guys were.
It'll come to me when we've lost it. But he's kind of in that role, and you're going to see these kind of boom plays and games. A couple of weeks ago, the long ball was really working. I just don't know that Evans is going to be consistent, and I think that that's going to be probably the frustration. The other thing I would say is I'm starting to feel like Ronald Jones is Fetch for you from Mean Girls. You're trying to make him happen, and it's not happening.
Hey, there's still time. We are only in week 5. I've liked what I've seen out of him in some runs. Yes, some runs look bad, but he has looked good at times. I really do think, I said this last year, I don't think Dirk Cutter was a very good offensive play caller there, / head coach, whatever you want to call him. I think if Ronald Jones is actually given the keys of the car, using that old cliche saying, and is given the ability to be the every down back, I think he can be an RB2 for you. He is an RB2 right now for fantasy. Surprising to a lot of people. They seem not to look at the stats. I know he hasn't done much, and he hasn't been necessarily that consistent, but he's still an RB2 for fantasy, so that has to say something. I do think if he gets the workload, he could easily produce those numbers on a weekly basis and be more consistent. At least that's my hope. We'll see what happens. Obviously, that might not happen with Peyton Barber there, but Peyton Barber to me is just a guy. He is not that talented. I don't know why they keep going to. Maybe I don't know what I'm talking about. I really think that Jones needs to be given the ball more. On the Saints side, we saw Teddy Bridgewater have a fantastic game against this defense, which was really considered to be one of the better defenses so far. They hadn't really played many people. They played Carolina with Cam, but they obviously had a shootout last week with the Rams. Bridgewater goes 26-34, 314 yards, 4 touchdowns, 1 interception, coming in as QB4 on the week with 41.76 points. Alvin Kamara, RB16, with 17.7 points, 62 yards on 16 carries, 42 yards on 6 catches. Michael Thomas balls out, wide receiver 2, 41.2 points, 2 touchdowns, 182 yards on 11 catches. And we saw Jared Cook finally make an appearance in this one, get you a decent amount of points for a tight end, or actually finishes as tight end 4, so more than a decent amount of points. 14.10 points, 41 yards, a touchdown on 4 catches, and Ted Ginn makes an appearance, 35 yards, 2 catches on, and a touchdown. We already talked about this a bunch. Until Breeze comes back, really the only people you feel confident starting are Thomas and Kamara. Maybe the light shining a little bit now toward Jared Cook. Are we believing in this performance, or you still need to see it for another week or two before you'd be willing to throw him back in your lineup?
Yeah, I don't know if I feel consistent about that right now, but Bridgewater seems like he's feeling a little more confident. This is his 3rd game as a starter, so we're going to see. I would not say automatically I'm throwing these other guys back in my lineup when Breeze comes back either, because first couple of games with Drew Brees, we really only saw Kamara and Thomas as steady performers too. It could just be a case of, we're going to have to get into the middle of the season when you start hitting those desperation bye weeks, which are coming where you have 6 or 8 teams out. You might start leaning towards some players, but right now, all the thoughts we had about Latavius Murray being Mark Ingram seem a little bit premature. All the thoughts about Jared Cook being the next Jimmy Graham seem a little premature. Thomas and Kamara just keep on going.
Yep, I mean, those two are obviously, as you said, the only guys that you're willing to put in every single week because they are just absolute studs regardless of who is playing at that position. I do need to see it from Cook for a couple weeks. I was someone who bought into him. I had him still in my top 10 at tight end. Own him in a couple leagues. I do think that's good for him. They did seem to kind of target him a little bit more than they have most of the season. I don't know if they were just trying to get him involved or if that was game plan specific, but I did like what I saw. But before I can trust him, I need to see it for at least another game or two. And as you mentioned, when Drew Brees comes back, that might change everything. Drew Brees looks like he might be back sooner than we all thought. There was a video released on Sunday of him already throwing the ball. So hopefully if you're a Drew Brees owner, that means he's only a couple weeks away. If you own Thomas and Kamara, you're not really worried about anything because they have been just fine in his absence. Do have a couple interesting games ahead against two really good defenses and then a couple bad games. They have the Jaguars and the Bears next, so those could be two tough games, but then after that, Cardinals, Falcons, Bucks. So 3 good games after that. So you're throwing those guys in, Cook, as you said, and as for me as well, a wait and see. The last game on the docket for us today, the New York Jets losing to the Philadelphia Eagles 6-31. For the Jets, there's really nobody to talk about here. Luke Falk, 15-26, 122 interceptions. None of their wide receivers did anything. It's all Le'Veon Bell. 43 yards on 15 carries, 45 yards on 7 catches to come in as RB17 on the week with 15.8 points. There is news that Sam Darnold might be back for week 5. He still has to get some testing done. They need that spleen to shrink down. As he said in a press conference last week, and this is not a joke, that with an enlarged spleen, if he gets hit in a certain way, he could actually die. And as he said in the press conference, he does like living, and I don't blame him for that, as we all do. So his health does come first. There's a shot that he could be out there for week 5. However, for me, I don't know if I trust anybody anyways. Even when Darnold comes back, this offense just does not look right. I think Bell's the only guy I would trust. Chris Herndon can come back this week. He's a guy we talked about on Friday. Pick up off your waiver wires if he's available because he was a tight end stud last year. But would you even be willing to give Herndon a shot right now with as bad as this offense looks?
No, I think we need Darnold to come back and needs to work his way back into it a little bit. Even Bell, you're going to have to moderate expectations. He's still, RB2, fringe RB1 because of the workload he's getting. 7 catches for 45, in PPR is really going to leverage you up even if you're not getting good running yards. But they have more problems than just missing a quarterback. And people were really hot on Twitter that it's time to fire Adam Gase. The guy's only been there for 4 games, but honestly, this team looks like they've taken a giant step back. This is a team that had a lot of potential promise coming in, and with Gase kind of forcing the general manager out and taking over the player personnel part, a lot of that's going to fall at his feet too. This is just not a team that looks very good in any phase of the game.
Yeah, I don't know if I'm someone who would say I'd fire Gase right now. He is on his 3rd string quarterback in Luke Falk. Trevor Siemian got his leg snapped on a tackle by Myles Garrett in that Monday night game. Obviously, nobody expected Darnold to get knocked out with mono. I think one of their biggest issues is that offensive line. There was a lot of talk about how they didn't play any preseason games, and Adam Gase was actually asked about that, and he said, well, they'll be fine. We're doing a lot in practice, and that goes kind of back to what you were talking about earlier with preseason. Clearly, they're not fine. That is by far their biggest issue. I don't know if you can put that all on Gase. I'm sure some of it, you have to put some of it because, again, we just talked about he didn't play him at all in preseason. So some of that has to go on him. I still would give him at least a year to see if he can do something with Sam Darnold. We all know that he is a supposed quote-unquote QB whisperer. That's why they brought him in here to help mentor and help Sam Darnold become a better quarterback. We can't say that he has or hasn't done his job yet because we've only seen Sam Darnold in 1 game. So I do feel like you've got to at least give him the season and see what Sam Darnold possibly turns into throughout the year. But it's definitely not a good start for them being 0-5. As you said, a lot of expectations. They, in all honesty, were right there with the Browns and being a team everybody thought was going to compete for the playoffs. And then we've seen that really that team in the AFC is going to be the Bills. It's not going to be the Jets. On the
fortunately, they're only 0-4 because they had that bye week. You're right. A lot of those points. I wouldn't fire Gase right away, but I think the fact he's already on the hot seat is an indication this team needs more than just a quarterback to return.
Yeah, I agree with you on that. I was someone who, when they hired Adam Gase to begin with, I was kind of scratching my head and like, okay, that doesn't even make any sense because I don't think Miami looks bad now, but if you go back and look at when he first took over that job in Miami, I don't think that roster was that bad, and he was not ever able to do anything with that either. So I'm not necessarily the biggest Gase fan in the world either. But as you just said, and I agree with you, we got to at least give him the year. I can't imagine they're going to fire him in season. But crazier things have happened, which, my God, reminds me of the news we haven't even talked about yet. But we're not talking about their team today, but we'll address it here right at the end as we finish up our last team in the Philadelphia Eagles. Carson Wentz, 17 of 29, 189 yards and a touchdown, coming in at QB 16, 18.3 points. Jordan Howard comes in as running back 24 with 12.2 points, 62 yards, 13 carries, and a touchdown. Miles Sanders, RB 31 with 10.4 points, just 9 carries for 15 yards, but gets you 49 yards on 4 catches. Alshon Jeffrey, wide receiver 32 with 11.2 points, 52 yards on 6 catches, and Zach Ertz, the darling of the ball here, 57 yards, 5 catches, and 1 touchdown. Eagles offense looked good against a bad defense. This running back situation is continuing to piss me off. Miles Sanders looks good to me when he's running the ball, but they're just not giving him the ball enough. He looks phenomenal in the receiving game, so I do think he gives you some PPR value every week as a flex starter. Does seem like Jordan Howard is going to be the guy for them. Already had Doug Peterson come out and say they're going to give him more carries. Definitely the guy down in the red zone. So if you got Howard really late in drafts, I think the same thing as Sanders. He's a worthy flex play because if he gets you those touchdowns and the Eagles are a high-powered offense, he's going to get you points every week. Outside of those two, I think for me it's just Jeffrey and Ertz. You can't trust Nelson Aguilar at all, and we don't know when we're going to get Deshaun Jackson back at this point. So just your overall thoughts on the Eagles before we talk about their division rival Redskins and the move they made this morning.
Yeah, I totally agree about the Eagles, and hard to take a ton away from this game. Their defense was so dominant with 10 sacks, all the turnovers, all the points they put up. Their offense didn't need to be great, and that's why the numbers are a little bit lower than you might have expected from a blowout game. Yeah,
absolutely. So let's see here. They actually have a real test here the next 6 weeks in a row for the Eagles real quick. Just going to read off the schedule. So it's definitely something you need to watch for. They have the Vikings next week, then the Cowboys, Bills, Bears, Patriots, Seahawks. And then they get the Dolphins, Giants, Redskins. So they've got a pretty tough schedule moving forward. We'll definitely get to see more out of this Eagles offense and what they're really going to be within these next 6 weeks. All right, as I just mentioned, there was some news that broke. It was about 5 o'clock in the morning, my time. The Redskins have decided to fire Jay Gruden. Not surprising. There's been a lot of real kind of bad back and forth between them and the front office since the draft. Apparently, Jay Gruden, who is a football guy, say what you want about him. I do think he is a decent head coach. He's had a lot of great offensive coordinators come out of there who have worked with him. And Kyle Shanahan, I can't remember the others off the top of my head, and Kyle Shanahan's the main one that stands out. But a lot of guys who have been successful in the NFL. And Jay Gruden apparently wanted to go after Daniel Jones. They felt that he was more ready. But Daniel Snyder wanted the hometown kid, the kid from Maryland, and Dwayne Haskins, and they decided him and Bruce Allen that's who they were going to take. And ever since then, it really kind of seemed to really kind of steer things the bad way for Jay Gruden. A lot of people thought he was on the hot seat anyways this year if they didn't make the playoffs, which seemed unlikely with their roster, that he was out anyways. I was someone who, I think I was actually talking about it with you, that I did not think that they would fire him. The Redskins, history has shown that they've only fired one coach in season. They've done it going 0-5. Just to kind of your thoughts on what this means for the Redskins. They bring in, is it Bryce Callahan, the offensive line coach. He's going to be the head coach now. I'm sorry?
Bill Callahan.
Okay. And he is apparently completely different than James Gruden, is going to run this ship completely different. There's a lot of talk that Dwayne Haskins might be the starter. He has already come out and said that he's not going to name a starter just yet. They do have the Patriots this week, so probably not the best team. I'm sorry, not the Patriots. They have the Dolphins this week, so a possible win. It looks like the toilet bowl for fantasy this week with them going up against the Dolphins. What do you think this means for the Redskins this season?
I think it means about the same thing as we saw before, and actually the story that was just posted not too long ago to ESPN says that Bill Callahan says they have not altered their stance on Dwayne Haskins, and he for sure will not start.
Even better.
The Miami Dolphins. So, I mean, I thought perhaps the final straw for Daniel Snyder with Jay Gruden was, if they were going to lose, might as well put out this young guy so we can see him and at least get some excitement from the fans. But then he gets fired, and it sounds like Callahan's sticking to that, not putting him out there either. I still think we're going to see Dwayne Haskins at some point. The Redskins are a really bad team, but the quarterback is not their only tough position. Another interesting aspect of the discussion with the general manager today was Trent Williams. They have made no progress with him, and they are obstinate that they will not trade him. So, that's a big asset. That's a big problem with their offense, is not having him. They seem completely unwilling to try to get anything for him. The Redskins remain a dysfunctional franchise to me.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to lie. I'm glad that they're not throwing Dwayne Haskins out there. There was a lot of talk on sports radio all day today that meant Dwayne Haskins was going to be thrown out there and see what he's got. They have been adamant from the beginning that he's just not ready yet. That is something Jay Gruden said multiple times. He's just not ready to be an NFL quarterback. As someone who's a big fan of the kid, I don't want to see him just get thrown out there and kind of ruined in a way like we saw Josh Rosen. Although I also don't think this guarantees he's their future quarterback. But depending on who they bring in, I would assume they're going to find a head coach that will come in and find a guy that they can pair up with Dwayne Haskins. But if we see something, the Cliff Kingsbury route where he comes in and says, you know what, I want to take Tua or Justin Herbert or Jake Fromm, a bunch of these guys coming out next year, we could see Dwayne Haskins going the Josh Rosen route. So it's definitely something to watch for. But I agree with you, Redskins. Go ahead.
I don't think we're going to see him go that Josh Rosen route simply because, Rosen was an organizational pick. Dwayne Haskins, the big rub where it seemed like Jay Gruden was going to be gone even before the season started is Haskins was Daniel Snyder's pick. I think Daniel Snyder likes him, wants somebody to believe in him. And that's what's very interesting. Callahan actually went so far as to say he's not even going to guarantee that Haskins will be active on game days. They may just keep McCoy and Keenum active.
Wow.
It's going to be interesting to see how that goes.
Yeah.
Because I feel like a big part of the reason they made the move after 5 games in the middle of the season to boot Gruden is because they have such a poor product and they really want to see Haskins. And this kind of confirms that, like, hey, what Jay Gruden told you about him not being ready seems to be true, seems to be an opinion held by a lot more than just Jay Gruden.
Yeah, so what we're saying is Callahan is going to be the interim head coach for about 2 weeks, and then we're going to get another head coach in there because he's not playing Dwayne Haskins. Matt, thank you so much for joining me today. I hope you enjoy the Monday Night Football game tonight. I'm hoping that I will. I have a bad feeling that I won't, but I'm hoping for a good game tonight, and I look forward to talking to you tomorrow and breaking down the rest of the Sunday slate and the Monday Night Football game.
Sounds great. Have a good night.
Prepare for glory!
I want to know if you got your popcorn ready. Do you got your popcorn ready?
I came out the womb, I was ready.
And he's hit the end zone for an unbelievable touchdown.
I would be honored if you played football for this team.
Throw it up above his head. They can't jump with me. Golly.
Oh, they tackle him at the 40-yard line.
Who can make a play? I can. Who can make a play? I can.
Are you hungry for the usual today? Or are you ready to spice things up with the new Nashville Hot Brisket from Firehouse Subs? We're kicking up our slow-smoked beef brisket with Nashville Hot Seasoning. It's topped with melted pepper jack and our sweet and tangy slaw, served piping hot on a toasted cornbread roll. Yeah, a cornbread roll. Save time. Order your new Nashville Hot Brisket on the Firehouse Subs app today. Firehouse Subs. Enjoy more subs. Save more lives. Participating locations, limited time only. Are you hungry for the usual today? Or are you ready to spice things up with the new Nashville Hot Brisket from Firehouse Subs? We're kicking up our slow-smoked beef brisket with Nashville Hot Seasoning. It's topped with melted pepper jack and our sweet and tangy slaw, served piping hot on a toasted cornbread roll. Yeah, a cornbread roll. Save time. Order your new Nashville Hot Brisket on the Firehouse Subs app today. Firehouse Subs. Enjoy more subs. Save more lives. Participating locations, limited time only.